Welcome to the Labyrinth. I'm your host Pratham Pado. My guest today is the one and only Tom Montalk. He's a fellow truth seeker on a quest to expose the dark and empower the light. His primary goal is to help others arm themselves to better fulfill their evolutionary potential. After studying physics and electrical engineering for 4 years, he left college to pursue more independent research. He has a lot of insights on spirituality, alienology, alchemy, Gnosticism, Hermeticism, quantum and scalar physics, forbidden history, and military tactics. Check out the links in the description. They will direct you to his website and his Twitter account. You can also explore his books on Amazon. And as always, if you find this podcast useful, do like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Tom, welcome to the Labyrinth. It's good to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, I will start by asking some vague questions, and based on our conversation, I may ask some follow-up questions with the interest of getting more precise. And the reason for the vagueness of my questions is because I'm still quite a layman to these concepts, and I would like to explore the foundations first. Um, what is the matrix or the reality in which we live?
Yeah, that is the major question. If you think about it, the Gnostics over thousands of years, I mean, going back to the early part of the first millennium, they asked the same question: What is the nature of this reality? And of course, over time, the religious viewpoint has given way to the scientific viewpoint, right? So nowadays, you ask a common person, "What is the nature of reality?" and they will simply point to what science says. And science talks about the Big Bang at least 13.7 billion years ago. It talks about the nature of matter and what that consists of. And in the end, when you ask it for an answer, science will say, well, ultimately, we don't know, but we do know that everything is made of subatomic particles, protons, neutrons, electrons, and quarks and gluons, and so on. But the thing is, as much as that picture has a lot of experimentation behind it, a lot of mathematics and proof, it can't answer certain questions. You see, there are materialistic people who believe in the scientific viewpoint, and they believe that nature or that reality as we know it is simply a very complicated machine. You know, that consciousness is not something independent, it's something that arises out of the complications of matter. Just like, you know, everything on your phone or your computer screen is merely a product of the electricity that's going through all the circuitry. Well, the same thing with our consciousness and our neurons, and neurons being made of subatomic particles. See, everything traces back to the fundamental building blocks of nature. But the problem is, if you're someone who has ever experienced anything anomalous in life, be it paranormal activity, be it a precognitive dream, where you have a dream where, you know, the dream tells you about the future, for example, and then it comes true. If you have ever had synchronicities, like repeating numbers like 1111 or 333, or, you know, these numbers that keep appearing not just on clocks but on license plates, receipts, you know, magazine covers, mail, whatever. You see it a lot, and you only see it at certain times, and it correlates perfectly with something that's going through your head or something that's going on in your life. You see, there are certain things about reality that are anomalous that science simply cannot explain. And so in a way, these things like synchronicity, for example, or paranormal activity, they disprove the idea that our reality is nothing more than a cold, mechanical, deterministic machine. So the materialistic scientific viewpoint, it seems like it has a lot of credibility behind it, but it's only because it's looking at a very narrow spectrum of reality. You see, reality is huge. It's very expansive. It includes everything, including consciousness. And science is only focused on a very, very, very narrow part of it. And of course, if you got your PhDs and your millions of dollars of funding, you can perfectly explore that narrow slice of reality. But what about everything outside of that? You see, everything outside of that, science has a choice. Science could say, wow, that's really weird that people are seeing ghosts or UFOs or having synchronicities, so let's investigate it. And that's what they should be doing. But that's not what they're doing. What they're doing instead is saying, oh, those people are crazy. There's no proof of it, and therefore there's no reason for us to investigate it because it's not even real. I mean, everyone knows that stuff is cuckoo, right? So the problem with science is it's become too politicized, to where it's not even willing to look into what is really going on with reality. And instead, what they prefer to do is study more and more and more and more of that little tiny slice of reality. See, just because you spend more time and money in this little area doesn't mean that you're broadening your knowledge. You're just becoming deeper in that little narrow part. And so in my life, because I've had so many weird experiences as a child with ghosts and certain, you could call them alien type encounters, I started to question the nature of reality. See, my dad was an engineer. Okay. See, so he was an engineer and he believed in the paranormal, but he also taught me a lot about science. And so because I learned a lot about science, I realized that these weird phenomena that I was experiencing could not be explained by science. And so that kind of set me on a path of trying to figure out what is actually truly going on. And so when I was 12 or 13, I started reading all the books that I could on metaphysics, spirituality, comparative religion, UFOs, paranormal, and so on. And over time, I developed a model of what could actually be going on with reality. And so since you asked the question, I'll say it in a very short nutshell. So my current hypothesis, is that just as Eastern Hinduism and Buddhism and certain Western esoteric belief systems say, reality is fundamentally consciousness. So at the very root, it is consciousness. And then everything else, matter, energy, space, and time, comes out of it. And of course, the question is, well, how can that be? Well, if you look simply at your own nightly dreams, for example, when you're dreaming, you've got matter, energy, space, and time inside your dream. Okay, you've got it all inside your dream, but it is all being generated by your own brain, by your own subconscious. So that is consciousness generating an environment. It's generating you in the environment. It's generating other dream characters. And everything looks separate. Everything looks like its own person. But in truth, it is your own psyche most of the time. Okay. So I do believe that reality that we are in right now is something similar to that, just at a much higher and more complicated level. For example, in a dream, when you have your subconscious generating all this stuff, well, here in waking reality, we have something bigger that is like a subconscious, but it's more of like a universal mind. And Hinduism has terms for it, of course. But the ancient Greeks, for example, they called it the Demiurge. And the Demiurge is simply the soul or subconscious of the universe that projects reality as we know it. So, but then, of course, another question arises, which is, well, if everything is generated out of consciousness, then how is it that you can have the laws of physics that are very mathematical, that are very rigid? You know, how is it that if you're not looking at something, everything behind you still exists? You know, if you're not thinking about the floor, you don't fall through the floor. There's always something there. If you go to sleep and you're unconscious, well, you wake up back in your bed, you didn't like disappear from reality. So clearly, despite everything seeming to be made of consciousness, there is a very rigid rule structure to it as well. And so what I think is going on there is that within the greater infinite mind that is projecting all of this, a part of it has been programmed, has been very, very rigidly programmed to act almost as like a frozen dream, or the occultists would call it a thought form, which is a construct made of thought that has very defined rules and behaviors to it. And it seems to me almost as if part of the universal consciousness, which is normally very free flowing and dreamlike, okay, part of it has been programmed and held in place very strongly, that you get this very persistent illusion that we call reality. And so when the ancients talk about this thing called the demiurge, what they're really talking about is this programmed part of a greater, more fluid field of consciousness. Okay? And so the reality that we exist in right now, most of it is very rigid. Most of it has a lot of physics to it. That's why you can go into a laboratory and you can explore subatomic particles and you can derive the equations from it. However, that doesn't mean that that's what reality is. That simply means that those are the rules of the dream, of the fiction that we are existing within. Right? So if you think about that concept, what you will then realize is that, okay, well, if reality has all these rules and structures behind it, then what about things like synchronicities or your subconscious wishes and desires manifesting? You know, manifesting is a whole practice in itself, where you simply focus on your desire, your wish, and if you put enough energy into it, it appears in your life. You know, the things can usually come true in a very mysterious way. See, those things I don't think can be explained by physics, because they are using the aspect of the universal fluid consciousness that isn't defined by mathematics. It is simply pure consciousness, pure thought. And so sometimes everything that is outside this demiurge matrix construct, sometimes some of that can bleed into here. Sometimes the dream can reveal itself and can reveal that, that there is a very interesting aspect of reality that is more fluid, symbolic, meaning, emotions based, versus the more left brain type functions, which are more like mathematics, rules, logic, physics, science, and so on. Right. So our reality has two aspects to it. Part of it is definitely more fluid consciousness, and the other part is more programmed. And that, I think, describes the two aspects of what we would call the matrix. So if you want to dive into that more, I can definitely, go into more detail about that.
What would you say is the purpose behind the construction of this matrix?
Yeah, to even get into that, you have to think about what is it that came before the construction of the matrix. Like, what is it? Um, and the one thing that we can say for certain is that consciousness is what existed before this matrix construct. And the reason why that is because if consciousness is the origin of matter, energy, space, and time, then it has to precede matter, energy, space, and time. So consciousness existed before that. Now, most likely, it's kind of like what happens in sleep before a dream arises. And because we're not conscious during that state, it's not easy for us to remember what happens. But there are certain people that can maintain their consciousness from the moment they go to sleep to the moment they wake up, and they can remember what happens before a dream starts. And usually what they will say is that they were in another realm of sorts, like another higher dimension, and they were experiencing certain vibrations and colors and beings and thoughts, these archetypal thoughts. So it is something that we can't really conceive, but it is a space of consciousness without matter, energy, space, or time. Okay, so it's like a realm of thought and feeling, and there are intelligences in it. And I guess if I had to put my finger on it, I would say that state must have existed for a very long time, and it had certain limitations to it. Maybe there was not enough challenge. Maybe there was not enough persistence. It was too fluid. Um, there's no opportunity for practicing, let's say, patience or determination, or seeing what you were really made of in the heat of a very difficult situation. So I do believe that it was either an error that happened, or it was a conscious decision to try an experiment. And the experiment was to use consciousness and program part of it to create a shared environment with very persistent rules, and then have beings enter into that environment in order to explore each other and just explore how they interact with each other. And what that reminds me of, that totally reminds me of how games work. Okay, if you think about how games work, it's like a mini reality with very rigid rules, with little game pieces, right? And the players enter the game and they move their pieces around, and through that interaction, they have fun, they have a challenge, they learn about each other, right? So I do believe that our matrix reality was designed to be that originally. The problem, however, is that what happens if you get stuck in a game, or you play the game for so long that you forget who you are? And what if the rules of the game, for example, one piece takes out another piece? That's a form of violence, you could say. What if that mentality seeps into the mindset of the player playing the game, where now they adopt that competitive mindset? What if the darkness goes from the game into the player, into the source of light that animates the game? Well, then what happens is you get a corruption of you get a corruption of what is going on outside the game that's sustaining the game. So what I believe happened is that this demiurge, which is you could call it the game master, or let's say the GPU that generates reality, if it got corrupted by the rules of this game, then in a sense you could say that it might have ended up serving the game itself versus the original intention, which was the higher beings that created this reality. So what I suspect happened is that our reality got corrupted by the law of the jungle here, competition, violence, all the pain and trauma that people go through facing their challenges. I do think that fed upward into the universal subconscious and corrupted a part of it, and it is now it is now fashioning reality in a way that embodies that darkness. So it becomes almost like a feedback loop where the law of the jungle feeds into the thing that's creating the jungle in the first place, which creates more of the law of the jungle. And so here we are existing in a state of competition, aging, disease, war, suffering, stress, right? All these negative things that we are going through in life, they owe themselves to due to the restrictive conditions here. It's almost like the rules of the game that were meant to create an exciting challenge have become a spiritual burden to such a point that I believe a lot of people are stuck here, and they've lost their connection with their spiritual self, and so therefore it's almost like the game is feeding on them instead of them using the game. That's pretty much what I think is going on.
Okay. Since we're anyway stuck here for the time being in the
Mm-hmm.
Matrix, how can we make the most of it? Or how are we supposed to live our lives?
Yeah, that's a big question, isn't it? Because we find ourselves here, and we find ourselves here with. So here, let me put it this way. So I have a really good memory of my early life, and I remember different bits and pieces of when I was born. Okay,
Mm, okay.
so I remember some of the first week of when I was in the hospital, and one of the things that I remember is being in the nursery, surrounded by other infants, and I was crying because I had this very forlorn feeling, a feeling that that I had such a big path ahead of me, like such a heavy weight, such a heavy burden, but I had a sense of purpose. I feel like I came here with a mission. All right. Now, in life, I found that whenever I strayed from that mission or that purpose, and I got distracted with something else, usually it would fail. Usually it would not be fulfilling. It would leave me empty. I would regret it. So, despite all the challenges that we face here that try to take us away from our path, we do have to find the thread, the thread of Ariadne, the Greek myth about the labyrinth and finding the Minotaur at the center. So we have to find that thread that leads us back into the light. And what is the light? The light is everything that makes our soul happy, like truly fulfilled at a soul level, not at the biological level. Some people they seek only money, sex, drugs, power, right? Because those are biological drives that are a product of evolution. But I'm talking about innate spiritual soul-based drives, things that make you feel more clear, more alive, more your true self. Okay.
Mm,
And if you peel back the layers on all your programming and all your false values and things you've chased that ended up not being fulfilling, well, you'll realize there are only a certain number of things that truly get you going at like a heart level. Okay. And those are the things that you have to tap into in order to find that thread through this labyrinth
mm.
and ultimately back out of it.
Okay. Okay. Um, so I want to talk a little bit about reincarnation. Do you believe in reincarnation? And if it is real, how does it work?
Yeah, reincarnation is an interesting topic because I do believe. Okay, look, so there's evidence of it, right? There's so many different studies. There's an entire small little department at the University of Virginia
Yeah.
that is all about afterlife and reincarnation. Okay, so it's not just crack pottery. It's a legit investigation in certain universities, and there's so much anecdotal data about children who remember their past lives
Mm,
and they give the details of it, and then they go check, and sure enough, the details match up.
mm,
Like, how is that even possible?
yeah.
Things that aren't even in newspapers or the internet that you can look up, things that only the family members know. And you could say one case is a hoax, you can say another case is a hoax, but there are hundreds of cases of reincarnation. All right, so there's something to it. Now, my personal belief, though, is it's not that me, Tom, gets born again as another person. What I think what happens is that me and that other person, that future life, we're both expressions of a common oversoul, like a higher being that is outside of 3D space times. It's like the rest of our being. Okay, like
Mm,
we here, we're just like finger puppets. Like here's one puppet, here's one puppet, here's one puppet. Well, these are all different lives, and but it's just one hand. It's just one hand that is inserting itself into all these puppets. So I think what happens is after we die, uh, well, there's a long process of I guess you could call it debriefing or review that happens, and you interact with other loved ones that have passed over as well. But in the end, I believe that you retract back into your source, your own personal higher self or your oversoul, and it distills the essence of all your lessons that you've learned, who you've become in this life. It takes all that gold, all those diamonds of wisdom, and it puts that back into itself, and then emits a new thing that is based on that. It's almost like when you're prototyping a product, and you take everything you learned from the previous one, even some of the same parts, and you put it into the next version of the prototype, right? So it's not the old prototype that's now inside the new prototype. It's more the essence of it that continues on. So I believe that in our next life, we are re-emanated from our source and continue on as a new life. So it's essentially reincarnation, but I think there are some subtleties to it that I think need to be considered.
Okay. So, and from that logic, I think we can conclude that birth and death is just an illusion. So, from learning all of this, uh, there is a very high potential that an individual could live a purely nihilistic life and say, hey, what's the point of all this?
Hmm.
This isn't even real. So, wouldn't it be completely okay to be a nihilist then?
Well, I don't think so. I think a nihilist would only be justified if we did not reincarnate. If we only had one life and there's nothing beyond this, then you're justified in being a nihilist because there is no greater purpose except for the one that you make. I mean, that's the whole point of nihilism. The idea that you create your own meaning, your own purpose, because otherwise there is none. Otherwise, there is just meaningless chaos or a cold mechanistic universe. So, atheists are nihilists by definition because they don't believe in a soul, they don't believe in an afterlife, right? So they're nihilists, and pretty much all of modern culture nowadays, especially Western culture, is based on nihilism because it's based on the most authoritative thing that we know, which is science, and science is extremely nihilistic. I mean, because it doesn't believe in consciousness, doesn't believe in God or the soul or the afterlife. Most of science, and so of course science is nihilistic. But as long as there is reincarnation, as long as there is something within us that lives on, then it is something that can build upon itself, you see, and grow over lifetimes over lifetimes. And so, therefore, what you do here and right now has consequences for your being for essentially the rest of eternity or however long you remain an individual sentient being, a spark of consciousness. And that is what gives meaning. That is what gives meaning to you. It gives purpose. The very fact that, for example, like wisdom. Okay, what if you only live one life? What is the purpose of wisdom if you're just going to lose it all? If you're just gonna, it's all gonna disappear back into dirt and ashes after you die. Then there's no point in wisdom, right? But if you live on, then wisdom does matter because wisdom is something that it gets uploaded to your personal cloud, you could say, your higher self. See, wisdom is what changes you. And so next time in your next life, you're going to start off on a better foot because you have an innate subconscious sense of intuition that is based on the wisdom that you gained in prior lives. Right? So you're kind of investing in yourself by being a good person, by learning wisdom, by growing yourself spiritually. And so that's why reincarnation is kind of the antidote to nihilism.
Okay. When I was younger, I used to be any atheist too because I grew up in India and there's a lot of religious extremism and there's a lot of bad things from that comes from religion all around the world. And as
Mhm.
a result, I in my teenage years, in my early 20s, I was a very hardcore atheist. I used to laugh at these kind of things, the kind of things that you talk about. But now gradually, I have uh, y- as I've grown as a person, I am learning more and more of these things. Manifestation was one of those things that I used to laugh at, but now I'm starting to think, hey, how can I manifest more in my life? Is there a technique that can help individuals get better at manifesting?
Mhm. Yeah, there totally is. And luckily, because manifesting, the only thing it requires is your time and your dedication, right? It doesn't require, you don't really have to attend very special courses or buy expensive books. You don't have to study under a master. It's a very simple principle. And to know what those techniques are, it kind of helps to understand how manifesting even works. Okay. So I think most of your people watching know what manifesting is, but in case you don't, It stems from the fact that your subconscious and the universal subconscious, the Demiurge or whatever it is that generates reality, they are connected at the root. Okay? They're connected at the root. And so if you change your subconscious, it's going to change the thing that generates reality. So, okay. So, for example, if you change your subconscious with the intention that, for example, you make a new friend, the friend is perfect for you, the best friend you've ever had, okay, that idea, if you take that thought and you charge it up with the emotion that you would have if you actually met this friend, you know, the excitement, the gratitude, the relief, the happiness, the fun, all right? You take that emotional energy and you mix it with that thought and you just kind of focus on that for 5 minutes, 10 minutes per day. You do that a couple times a week. Most likely, within 1, 2, 3 weeks, you'll meet that friend. You'll meet him through a very synchronistic, you know, almost magical coincidence. The way this friend comes into your life, and interestingly enough, it's very similar to doing the same thing in a dream and generating a dream character. Although in this case, it's not just a product of your mind; it's an actual other person. There are some questions about, okay, well, what does that say then? How real is that person if you manifested a person? And that's a whole philosophical discussion in itself. But I think most likely that person is real, and perhaps they also have the same wish to meet with someone that's compatible with them, and maybe the universe kind of saw these two beings wishing for the same thing, and you know, connected their paths, and that's how it happened. But you know, it doesn't have to be living beings. It can also be material items, and see, that's the unfortunate thing. Nowadays, in the whole New Age field, manifesting is a very big topic. Why? Because, well, of course, everyone wants a better life. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, they want more money, they want more love, they want more success, whatever, and that's okay. However, the New Age focuses way too much on the materialistic aspect of it, of manifesting money. And so there's a whole industry that has been built around manifesting, where people just try to manifest, you know, the super hot sports car or the super hot blonde or whatever. You know, they go for these materialistic things because, and the reason why that is because they're not questioning where their desires are coming from. They're not going deep enough and saying, okay, this is coming from my ego shadow, social programming. I'm just trying to impress my dad who always rejected me. You know, these subconscious things. They're not thinking about whether it's that or whether it's, this is my soul mission. This is what my heart truly wants. This is what will make me more aligned with my purpose in life. They're not making that. They're not making that distinction. And so because of that, manifesting gets a very bad reputation in some circles, because those skeptics are looking at it and saying either it's impossible, or if it is possible, then people are just using it for essentially black magic, you know, trying to manifest their darkest desires in life by manipulating reality. Almost like a monkey reaching into a vending machine trying to pull out the candy. You know, it's trying to jiggle the vending machine of reality to, you know, manifest goodies for itself over and over again. Well, that is how manifesting can be misused, right? But we also have to remember that manifesting it's not so much a technique. I mean, there are techniques, but it's not so much just a technique. It is a way of existing. It is a fact of life, just as gravity and rain and money is a fact of life. It's a fact of life that our subconscious is always influencing reality, is always influencing what probabilities, what probable futures we are drawing to ourselves. And so if our mindset is, you know, pretty flat, it's just very mundane, you know, very mainstream, like an NPC kind of mindset, if that is our mindset, and if that is what our subconscious is programmed with, then our life is going to be mundane, boring, non-magical, everything that a skeptic believes reality to be, you see. And so it's not so much when you manifest, you're creating something magical. It's more like you're simply shifting what you are already manifesting. See, skeptics are manifesting a reality where magic does not exist for them. But that doesn't mean that that's what reality is. It's only what reality is for them.
Okay.
So if you change your mindset to a more magical mindset, a more positive, optimistic mindset, and if that filters down into your subconscious, then that is going to alter reality, or the thing that generates reality, and draw to yourself more magical, more happy, more optimistically, more optimism-inducing experiences. So that's essentially it. Now, if you want a technique, if you want like the technique that I use, my favorite technique is essentially you have to be in at least an alpha brainwave state. So you have to take a nap. So what you do is you lie down. Okay, you lie down. You set a timer, let's say 10 minutes, and it repeats. So you set a timer for 10 minutes, you just kind of lie down and you just try to take a nap. You just try to fall asleep. Okay. So for 10 minutes, your body's like starting to wind down, you get more and more sleepy. And right around the 10-minute mark, your timer goes off. Okay. So your timer goes off. And since it's a repeating timer, for the next 10 minutes, here's what you do. For the next 10 minutes, focus on the probable future that you want, or the outcome that you're going for, the thing that makes your true soul, like your true heart, truly happy. Okay. You focus on it as if you were actually there, experiencing all your five senses, what you're seeing, what you're smelling, what you're hearing, like as if you were actually truly there, like imagining the situation. Okay. So you imagine the situation, or even like a little glimpse of it, and you evoke the emotions that you would feel if you were in that situation. Like I said, the happiness, the excitement, the joy, awe, wonder, whatever it is, evoke that emotion. And you try to maintain that for the next 10 minutes until the timer goes off. And that's it. So it takes 20 minutes total. 10 minutes to get really relaxed. And the reason why that's so important is because when you're fully awake, okay, and you're in your beta brainwave state, you and your subconscious are this far apart. Okay? You're not in contact really. But the sleepier you get, the closer you get to sleep, the more they merge. And of course, when they're fully merged, that's when you're dreaming. Because when you're in a dream, you're literally in a projection of your subconscious, right? But you don't have to go that deep. You can just be in a mildly sleepy state. And in that state, as you're kind of weaving in and out of sleep, you do that. You do the thought, you do the emotion, you hold it for 10 minutes. And what that does is it saturates your subconscious with that energy and with that thought. And that passes it on to the Demiurge, or whatever creates reality. And then it dramatically heightens the probability of that thing turning true. So that's pretty much it.
Okay. Okay. So I think like most people, even I am not very familiar with the desire of my soul. I know my ego very well. I know exactly what my
Yeah.
ego wants. But I like, how do I try? How can I fulfill the desire of my soul if I'm not? It feels like I'm not even in touch with my soul because of the daily
Mhm.
struggles. So how can we transcend our egos and find our true, authentic selves?
In order to answer that, first of all, you do have to understand what the ego actually is. Okay, what is the ego actually? And so the ego, all it is it's an AI. It's an artificial intelligence that exists in our brain, that has been programmed by our biology and by our social, or by our social programming. So our social conditioning, everything that we've experienced growing up, all the hurts, all the pain, all the alienation, the rejection, frustrations, and so on, all the value systems that we've been programmed with, those go into making up this AI that we call the ego. And so the ego exists in our mind as an autonomous personality. It's kind of like with Chat GPT nowadays, these large language models. You can say, "Hey, I want you to pretend to be this person or that kind of a person," right? And it'll pretend, it'll role play as that role. Well, our ego is role playing as what we've been conditioned with by all of our life experiences, and of course, as well by our biology. So, hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution have programmed certain habits or desires, goals in us. I mean, like the whole idea for like social validation, for example, because
Mm.
evolutionarily, if you didn't get social validation, then you're going to be kicked out of the tribe, and then you're going to starve in the woods or get eaten by a bear. So, social validation is one, finding a mate is another, having wealth in some form, like food nowadays is money, but originally it was food and tools or whatever, land, status. Okay, so all these things have been programmed into us biologically, and they're always there in the back of our mind, pushing us in that direction. Like for example, a woman. Okay, the purpose of a woman in evolution is to have children and to raise the children and to be a good wife. Okay, well, a woman, for example, if she reaches a certain age and doesn't have kids yet, most women will start feeling very nervous. All right, they'll start feeling a pressure, like, God, I really got to have a kid, and I hope it's soon because before I get too old. That's not only social programming, that's also biological programming that's coming through. So those are just examples of these subconscious irrational impulses that we feel because it's and those things have shaped our self-perception in life. For the moment we were a kid and going through puberty and becoming adults, we've been hammered by these biological impulses that have been created by evolution. Now, in addition to that, of course, you also have religious programming, social conditioning, your social interactions, school, and so on. What you see, especially in movies, media, TV, right? Social media nowadays, like all these women trying to look like the Kardashians, for example. That's social conditioning. That's feeding into their social identity. It's trying to mold them into something which they actually are not. But that's what those are the value systems that they have adopted. And that entire thing is what makes up our ego. And that's the issue. The issue is that the ego has programming that taps into very primal desires that don't come from the soul necessarily, but come from our biological programming. But it feels the same to us. So when you do have an actual soul impulse, okay, if you actually have a soul impulse, it'll also come from the subconscious. It'll also be in the back of your mind, nudging you to do it. So that is a conundrum, that we have these two subconscious impulses. One, the false shadow ego self, and the other, the true self, which is your spirit, your soul, your heart, which you really came here to do. And distinguishing between the two, it takes a lot of trial and error. But one thing that kind of helps is to think about how each one feels when it manifests. Okay, so when an ego desire comes up, what is it that it feels like? And what it feels like, it's a hole that you want to fill, like a hunger. When you're hungry, it's like a hole in your stomach that you want to fill with food. Okay, well, when you got a hole in the shadow part of your subconscious, it wants to be filled with what? With social validation, with status, money, power, approval, those sorts of things. And so you can feel it's almost like a hunger, like a ravenous wolf-like hunger in a way. And if you think about like all the different vices, like gluttony, greed, and so on, those are ravenous impulses, and they come from a biological programming and and other negative sources. But it's essentially the ego shadow collective. That's where that comes from. So it feels like a hole to fill. It feels like blind. It feels like blind programming. Like you don't even know necessarily logically why you want it. You just do, and you don't really question it. It's almost like a part of your mind is telling you not to question it, right? It's like, and not only that, but it wants you to justify it. So you start coming up with pseudo logical rationalizations for why you should, whatever it is, like why I deserve to, let's say, use underhanded methods to gain more money and power, like some people believe. And they try to justify it to themselves. And a lot of criminals, a lot of supposed bad guys, they believe that they're not bad guys. They believe they're doing what's necessary, what's good, like I'm providing for my family or whatever. There's just rationalization to it that they know deep down it's wrong. Like they feel it intuitively. They feel that deep down what they're doing is it's kind of questionable, but they kind of shove that aside and they try to come up with excuses for why what they're doing is good. And that's an exaggeration, but if you pay attention to when you have an ego impulse, it'll feel like that too. Yeah. Like deep down you'll feel that it's kind of off, but you'll catch yourself lying to yourself or coming up with excuses about why you should go ahead and pursue it. So that's another. Another one is that it's very emotionally charged and kind of hurried. It's kind of like when a used car salesman or like a door-to-door salesman who's kind of slimy, when they really try to pressure you into the sale, and like buy now, the sale is going to be over in like 1 hour from now or something like that. There's a hurriedness to it. And so when an ego impulse arises, usually it only has a limited amount of time to try to fulfill it. So for example, if it's an ego impulse of overeating, like gluttony, it's not going to say like, yeah, you can eat that later on tonight or tomorrow or next week. No, it wants it now. Like it's that's a very obvious example. But the same thing happens too with materialism, like trying to buy something with online shopping, for example. I mean, it's fine to buy things, but if you become addicted to it, it's an addiction that wants you to have it now. And if you don't have it now, you're going to start getting kind of shaky, right? You want that thing right now. You want it so badly, but it's coming from that ravenous, insecure part of you. You see. So those are examples, and also the energy just feels very, it feels very constrictive, almost like a drug or like a spell or like a curse or something that's coming over you. It doesn't feel you don't feel clear. You don't feel like more at ease with yourself. You feel more like you're being taken away from yourself towards being something that you're not. So these are just a couple of red flags that indicate an ego shadow impulse. So in contrast to that, we also have impulses that have to do with coming from your source, like your heart, your spirit, your soul. Okay. And those kinds of impulses, it feels more like a potential of what you actually are, of who you actually are. It feels more like a potential yearning to be expressed. It feels more like you becoming more of yourself, like your true self, in a very clear, lucid, feels right kind of way. Okay, it feels like an expansion, like you are expanding your potential. That's what it feels like when it's coming from your true self. So, for example, we all have different hobbies that we enjoy, different interests, and some of them might be more shady. Like some people are really into pornography, for example, right? But then there are other things too, like playing music. If you're a musician, you just play music and you come up with a tune. See, there's nothing bad about that, and there's nothing really egotistical about that either. You're just singing like a bird. You're expressing your true nature of who you are when you mess around with music and you're being creative, right? So that's an example of something that comes from your true self. And when you do that, you feel happier. You feel more fulfilled. You feel more like you're more like embodied. It's more like you're actualizing yourself. So and typically it's filled with a sense of fun or fascination or wonder or just an overall sense of rightness and well-being. And those are the clues that it's coming from your true and genuine self, as opposed to the more like demonic, greedy glee that the ego shadow complex has, that has to lie to itself to make itself feel good about what it's doing. But even though it knows deep down that it's not doing good. So if you just think about those two contrasts, that's pretty much how you can tell the difference.
Okay, okay. Um, Earlier you said that you had encountered aliens. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So one of the first. All right. Yeah, I don't know how many people watching believe in alien stuff, but if you don't have any personal experience with it, the best you can really do is just look at dozens, if not hundreds, of encounter cases, and then make up your own mind whether there is really something to it. Okay. But in my case, I was fortunate, or I should say unfortunate, another way, to have had paranormal experiences when I was a kid. So my mom, she is from Singapore, so she's Asian. My dad, he's German, so I grew up in Germany for until I was like 7 or 8 years old. But anyway, so I was a little German kid, and one of the first encounters I had is where I was asleep in my crib at night. I was like, I don't know, 4 to 6 months old, something like that. Actually, a little bit after that, maybe 6 or 7. And I remember waking up in the dark, although there was a spinning toy above me, like a mobile, that was lit up by a light. And I remember feeling something approaching me from the side of the crib. And all of a sudden, it would look down at me, and what it was like a gray alien face, like a white, gray, ashen, wrinkly face with like beady black eyes, and it was just kind of staring down at me. And I freaked out so bad, I couldn't even talk at the time, but I could make out one word. That one word was ghost. I said ghost in German at the top of my lungs, and my mom and dad came running in like a minute later, and of course the thing was gone by that point. But this happened many nights during that time. So I remember that pretty well, and it was pretty terrifying. You're just like a little kid alone in a crib, and some creepy ghost alien or something appears over the side. So that was one. The ones that happened after that, let's see. I had quite a number of classic alien abduction experiences as well, and most of those would involve my mom as well. So my mom and we would be in our bedroom during the daytime. So it was like I would estimate like 2 in the afternoon, judging by the angle of the sun coming in through the windows. So it was like 2 in the afternoon. My mom and I were in the bedroom, and the door was closed. And then she would say, "Tom, I have to go out there and do some stuff," and I could go out into the rest of the apartment. And I sensed that there was so much activity happening in the rest of the apartment, like it was full of people, but they weren't people. And so she left, closed the door behind her, and then that's when my memory would start kicking in of all the previous times that this had happened. And all of a sudden I remember, oh crap, I know exactly what's going to happen next. And sure enough, the door would open, and in would come 6, 7, 8, even a dozen classic gray aliens in blue bodysuits, and they would rush up on me and try to grab me. However, half the time I would either hide in the corner or I would hide under the bed. And sometimes when I hid under the bed, they couldn't get me. So I remember being under the bed, looking out, and seeing little gray alien legs running back and forth around the bed, not knowing how to get me out of there until they called a supervisor, who then came in and then kind of convinced me to come out. And that's when my memory starts to go blank. But I remember that. I remember coming back from the abduction where the ship was out in the courtyard, probably 10 stories up, floating in the air. And I remember being floated out of it over the courtyard, looking down and looking at all the other apartments. I remember that very clearly. And then landing in our balcony, and then back into the apartment and back into the bedroom, and then where I would lay down on the bed and go to sleep. And then, like a minute or two later, they would be gone, and then I would wake up having no memory of what just happened, because that's typically how it happens. And the only reason why I do remember it is because sometimes I would have memory flashes of the abduction experience. And so during that time, I was telling my grandma and my mom all the time about these stone men, or these gray men that would always come for me. And they thought, of course, that it was my imagination. So my mom at the time, she had a lot of weird abduction symptoms as well, like really large bruises on her body with puncture marks in them, for example. That was a classic one. But see, she was Buddhist, okay? And Buddhism, especially not like the esoteric Zen Buddhism that we know in the West, but more like the average person's Buddhism in the East. That entire culture, it's very familiar with the idea of dead spirits and ghosts and so on. So that's what they believe in. And so when she had all these marks, she thought that it was our dead great grandmother who was coming around and like pinching her, something like that. And it spooked her so much that she took a plane back to Singapore trying to get away from it. You know, and it still followed her there. So yeah, weird stuff was going on, and those were my earliest alien encounters. And I had other things like a demon encounter where I was sitting on the couch watching TV at night, and my mom was there too, and I kept feeling something behind me. I kept feeling something behind me watching me, like an evil, very evil presence. And so I kept turning around, looking behind the couch at the dining room behind me, and the light was on, and nothing was there. Well, my mom, she goes into the kitchen to get me like a lollipop or something, and I feel it again, but this time it was way stronger than before. And I turned around, and there it was. It was like a 7 or 8 foot tall, so that's like what, like 2 to 3 meters tall shadow being with red orange glowing eyes, just kind of looking down at me. And I freaked out so bad, I screamed at the top of my lungs. My mom comes running in, and she has to slap me out of it, and I was like crying, and she carried me to the bedroom to get away from whatever it was. She didn't see it, and when I looked over her shoulder when she was carrying me, I didn't see it either, but I 100% saw this demonic shadow being looking down at me. So I had demons, I had aliens, and a couple other ghost experiences. But yeah, that kind of taught me early on that, man, reality is just messed up. It's like, what the hell is going on? And that's what, like I said earlier in the show, that's what kind of put me on this quest to try to figure out what is really going on and how to deal with these non-human forces, like what they're all about, how their tactics work, and how it's going to impact the future of humanity, and ultimately what we can do about it.
How is a demon different from an alien?
Oh, that's a great question. So nowadays, if you ask people what are aliens, some will say, okay, they're extraterrestrials, they come from another planet. But then some people will say that aliens are actually demons in disguise,
Hmm.
right? So demons, I mean, every culture knows demons. Every culture has a name for demons. Like I know like in like the Hindu cultures, you got the asuras and various other types of demons. You got the Naga snake people that live underground, for example. But the Chinese culture has their own term for it. Native American has their own term for it. And Christianity, we call them demons. But what are demons really? Well, demons are simply, I want to say, malevolent or maleficent, non-physical constructs of consciousness. So they're beings, the beings that are made of dark, demonic, or dark, evil energy, and their sole goal is to terrorize, to feed on your soul energy, and to basically attack your spirit, your light, your God spark within you, and kind of cut you off from the greater divinity. So it's kind of to take your soul and to drag it down into darkness through corruption, through fear, through depression, self-loathing, drug abuse, whatever, crime, suicide, all these things that afflict humanity. Okay, obviously some of it is just due to being under too much pressure in life, so therefore you feel depressed. I mean, that's logical, right? However, demons go after people who have that sort of thing already going on, and they make it way worse than it needs to be.
So
And that's the issue.
yeah, so a
Yeah.
demon's kryptonite would be if I tried to be as positive and compassionate and empathetic and joyful as possible,
Mhm.
then that would terrify the demon, right? Logically speaking.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And for example, if you are actually being attacked by a demon in bed, like it takes a very strong demon to do this, but I know people who have experienced this. So if a demon actually attacks you, you got a couple choices. You can try to fight with anger and try to hit it with your astral body or whatever, but a lot of time that's just going to feed into it. That's just going to make it stronger. What you can do instead, if you want, if you have the ability to do this, is power yourself up with love, euphoria, a connection to the divine, or even try to love the demon. Even try to project towards it a feeling of love or sympathy, like, oh, I'm so sorry that you are this way. And you'll watch what happens. The demon will get so confused, it'll get discombobulated because it can't handle that energy. And a lot of times it'll either break apart or it'll kind of retreat back into the portal, the astral portal that it came from, and that's it for that experience. So yeah, that positive energy can totally mess with demons. But so I forgot to answer your question. How are demons different from aliens? And so in my personal experience, demons are strictly non-physical beings. They're non-physical, like ghosts are. They're like evil ghosts, essentially. Okay. Whereas aliens, they are also non-human. However, they have physical bodies. They have physical ships, physical bases. Now, the reason why there's a confusion between the two is because their bodies and their ships and their technology and their bases and so on, it's not physical in the way that we think of physicality. Like for example, this stylus right here, okay? This stylus, it's made of matter, and I can set it down, I can pick it up. It's solid, it's persistent. As long as I own this, it's going to be the way that it is. Well, the kind of physicality that aliens come from or that they embody, it's more fluid. It's almost like they have a cheat code to the Matrix, and they're able to alter the Matrix code so that they can alter their form, their shape a little bit. Their technology it's kind of like an enhanced version of the reality that we exist in. Now, I don't know how old you are, but in the old days when you got those old video game consoles like Mario on the original Nintendo, you saw like how blocky all the characters were, and there's only so many colors, like 32 colors or something. And if you compare that with video games nowadays video games are ultra realistic, right? But it's still both games, they're both simulations. So it's almost like aliens come from another higher reality that is almost like a higher bit version of our video game. So there are additional things that they can do, and they can project themselves here into this collective dream or the simulation, whatever you want to call it. But they can also retreat back into another space-time that is a higher bit, I guess you could say. So it's got more complexity to it, more just a richer experience. So it is like we live in almost like a lower reality, which I guess kind of falls or ties into the idea of humanity being a fallen race, that this reality is fallen. Like, what does that even mean? Is it just spiritually fallen, or is it actually fallen in a very fundamental, actual, tangible way? Like almost like when your computer screws up in Windows and you have to reboot in safe mode. See, back in the day when you reboot in safe mode, okay, now you can't do as much. The colors are kind of messed up because you only got so many colors to work with, right? It's very restricted. So it's almost like we live in a safe mode reality, and they come from the full operating system. And that's why they have technology that we can't understand. Because when we try to understand their technology, we are using our safe mode rules to understand the rest of the entire true operating system that it is a version of, right? So that's why when you try to use physics and you try to talk about, oh, how does a UFO work? How does their propulsion work? Maybe it's gravitons, or maybe they're shooting neutrinos out or something. Well, gravitons and neutrinos, those are words that we use based on our math, our reality, our five senses, our instruments. And that does not include some of the things that aliens use. And so what is it that they use? Well, for that, you can't look at science. You have to look at occultism or religion, or shamanism, something like that. Because those people in those fields, they're familiar with things that go beyond physics. In occultism, for example, like in occultism, they talk about, for example, subtle energies, etheric energy or astral energy. Etheric and astral, these are terms that occultists use to describe a non-physical kind of energy that is not within the box of science and the five senses. In order to interact and work and see astral and etheric energies, you have to be clairvoyant. Because what clairvoyance is, when your third eye opens, right, and you're able to see through your third eye, what you're seeing is you're using a part of your soul that is outside of this 3D space-time to observe energies that are outside this 3D space-time. So you're developing a sense organ that is capable of perceiving things that are beyond the five senses. That's why it's called ESP, extrasensory perception. All right. And so there are energies, there are principles, and therefore there are technologies that use these energies that are not within the box of the science that we know. And that is what aliens use. And that's why scientists cannot fully understand how their technology works, because it's using etheric and astral energies. I call it demiurgic energy, because earlier when I talked about demiurge being the thing that creates our reality, well, this demiurge, it's made of conscious energy, and the occultists would say that it is made of etheric and astral energy. That is the thing that actually makes up the demiurge. And from this etheric and astral energy field, matter, I don't want to say precipitates, but it's rendered from it. It's kind of like in your browser, okay? So when you load up a browser and you go to a website, is that what the website actually looks like? And the answer is no. The website is actually ones and zeros. It's machine code, right? But what you see on your screen is, there's like a text box and a title and whatever, button to click. So our reality is rendered from code that is not even physical. It's code that exists in this etheric astral energy field. And so if you have access to this etheric energy field, if you have access to that and you alter it, you can alter physicality. And so that's why it's known within the alien abduction field, for example, that aliens can dematerialize themselves. They can walk through solid walls. They can take an abductee and levitate them out on a blue beam through a closed window. Like, how is it possible to take a person through a closed window? Well, you can if you have control of the fundamental matrix code that makes reality what it is, right? So we're dealing with beings that are semi-physical, that have access to a higher reality, and that can dematerialize from here. And because they can dematerialize, that's why some people think that they might be ghosts or demons, because ghosts and demons are also non-physical. They can also seem to be here but then go somewhere else. So, but they're not exactly the same thing. I mean, demons are more of a spiritual phenomenon. It's more of an astral, spiritual, subtle energy phenomenon, whereas aliens, they have access also to those etheric and astral energies. However, they are still tangible. They still have bodies that need food, that die. They're born or grown or whatever. So that's pretty much the main difference.
Okay. So we live in this physical reality, and you talk about these two other kinds of realities: the astral reality, the etheric reality. How do you distinguish between physical, etheric, astral, and how do they uh, how do they look like?
Yeah, so I think one of the better places to, well, okay, so there's a couple data sources you can refer to when you think about this question. One are clairvoyants, who have an open third eye, and they can feel, they can see, they can sense these etheric and astral energies and constructs. So they're familiar with that. That's what they use. They got the vision to be able to interact with it. So that's one. Another would be out of body experiences. So astral projection, for example, that's an example of someone who can, of people who leave their physical body, and because they're leaving their physical body, they're no longer bound by the censoring filters of biology, of the five senses. Because if you're only looking through your physical eyes, you're only going to be able to pick up three-dimensional photons, because that's what, that's how your eyes work, right? So but if you want to see a ghost, for example, or you want to see a cloaked UFO that's phased out of this reality, you can't rely on your physical eyes. You have to rely on something that is also outside reality. And like I said, one way to do that is clairvoyance, because clairvoyants, they have that open third eye so they can see it. But also when you go out of body, when you do astral projection, that part of you, your soul, leaving the body allows you to therefore you peek over the wall of physical five sense reality. So astral projection is also able to see the etheric environment, and if you go even further, then you leave the etheric environment and you enter the astral environment. So the etheric, if you can see it, the etheric is it looks kind of like a ghostly glowing copy of existing physical reality. And it's kind of like, I'm trying to think of a metaphor. It's kind of like if you have a camera, okay, if you got a camera and you've got like a very good focusing lens, and you focus in on one object that's right here, make it really sharp, right? Everything else is blurry. But then if you change the focus, now you can see everything behind it, but now this part is blurry. So our reality is the entire scene. That includes the etheric, the astral, whatever, the physical. But when we are awake, when we are in these bodies right here, right now, the focusing lens of our consciousness is only focused on that sharp physical reality: matter, energy, space-time, protons, neutrons, electrons, whatever. Okay, that's what we're focused on. And quantum physics says exactly the same thing, that when you observe something, when you measure something, it becomes a single tangible thing. But if you're not measuring it, if you're not observing it, then according to quantum physics, it exists in a delocalized state that is fuzzy, it's blurry. Okay, because it's not only that thing, it's other possibilities on the side all happening at the same time. So it's this field of nebulous possibilities that is more than just physicality. So what I'm saying is when you use etheric vision or you go out of body, you're seeing not just the sharp thing, you're seeing the fuzziness that's around it. You're entering into the rest of the scene by refocusing your consciousness. So I think that's what the etheric is. But the thing about the etheric though is that the etheric is still related to physicality. So for example, if you can go like 10 meters northwest in the etheric, and you can do that. And if you pop back into the physical, you're 10 meters northwest in the physical as well. So it's an overlap, all right? So you got physicality here, you got the etheric here, and the etheric is it's like in a browser. If you look at the source code of your browser, you've got HTML code, JavaScript, CSS, and different scripts running. That is the etheric essentially. And then what we see on the browser, that is physical reality. So beneath physical reality is all this matrix code that makes it. And there's also like if you look at the code, a lot of times there are comments in there, like invisible comments. So when you just load up the website in the browser, you don't see those comments. But if you look at the code itself, underneath it, the source code, you can see that the developer said like, oh yeah, move this thing up here next time, or this part is where the contact form is. Just like these invisible comments that are in the code. And what this metaphor translates to is that in reality, you might have an inanimate object, right? But if you looked at the source code, you might see a comment that says, living energy field. Why? Because let's say I focused my psychic power into it and I charged it up with life force energy, with etheric energy, astral energy, whatever. So now it's not just a stylus anymore. It's not just a piece of plastic. It is something that is imbued with a non-physical energy. But the non-physical energy, we can't see it because it's in the source code. It's commented out from our senses. So we can't see it through our physical eyes. We have to have the eyes of a developer, which is our third eye, to be able to see the source code and be able to, oh, this thing has a blue pink aura around it. Why does it have a blue pink aura? Because Tom charged it with a psychic energy, so now it's more than just a piece of matter. And so if you look at a dead corpse of a dead person versus a person who is still alive, if you've got that developer vision, you can see the difference between the two, right? But if you only look through the eyes of a physicist, I mean, a person who just died, they're still going to be warm. There's still going to be blood, circulating a little bit in there. I mean, for all intents and purposes, they're going to be almost no different from a person who's still alive. But why? Because there's another component which science cannot see, which has left the body, and of course, that's the soul. Okay. So that's sort of how you can view it.
Okay. So who are the aliens who run this matrix, and what is their agenda?
The aliens who run this matrix. So if you look in ufology, and you look at all the different types of encounter cases going back to the 1950s, 40s, and also throughout history. You can go into the 1800s, 1500s, 2,000 years ago, the ancient Sumerians. There are plenty of encounter cases with many different kinds of beings. Especially in the 50s and 60s, there's all these like crazy aliens that only one person saw and no one else ever saw it again. But then over time, the same 4 different alien types keep recurring over and over again. So it's almost like you started out with all these different alien types, and then over time they kind of, most of them kind of faded out. And nowadays we only got 4 main types. So the first one we all know, they're called the Greys. That's not what they call themselves, but we call them the Greys. And there's these short, the short, big-headed guys with the black eyes. And you got round black eyes. You've got almond-shaped black eyes. You've got 3 feet tall, 4 feet tall, even taller, and so on. You got different Greys. You got those, all right? Second one, we've got Nordics, or you could call them humanoids. And they're people that look like humans for the most part. Some of them are, they got white skin, blonde hair, blue eyes. Some of them got brown hair, but fair skin. And some of them look perhaps a little Asian. Those are the main types that we see. So they look human, but they're aliens, so they have extremely advanced telepathic powers, and they got extremely advanced technology, right? Which is kind of weird to think about, like what's going on there, right? So you got those. And then third, you have the reptilians. And anyone who's familiar with David Icke knows about reptilians. Or if you've been on the internet, you've seen videos on BitChute, all those conspiracy videos, there's always reptilian shape-shifting videos that you stumble across when you start getting into conspiracy research. So you got the reptilians, and then the last ones, which they're not as well known, but they seem to be at the top of the hierarchy of these four. And those are the mantids. They call them, well, some of them call them a certain type of tall gray, but they look like praying mantises because their heads are kind of triangular and they got huge eyes, kind of like a praying mantis has. And they're really tall too. And their hands kind of go like that in the front. So it looks like a praying mantis. They look kind of like insects in a way. So those are the four main types that we typically see. And so when a person gets abducted, and let's say they get abducted by grays, a lot of times during these abductions, they will also see the Nordics, the reptilian, perhaps on rare occasion, the mantid as well. Those are the ones that are reported most commonly nowadays. And if a person does have other types of aliens that they see, I mean, there are other types of aliens that are seen, but they're just not as common. And they don't seem to be the ones in charge. You know, they seem to be more like visitors or like lesser important groups, you know. But the four ones that we keep on hearing about are the Greys, the Nordics, the Reptilians, and the Mantids. And I wrote a book about those four and their agenda. It's called Discerning Alien Disinformation. It's free on my site if you go to my site, montalk.net. And in that book, I describe their agenda. I describe how they deceive people, their methods of exploitation, and ultimately how to see through their disinformation. So when you ask me, you know, who is it that's ultimately in control, I would say most likely it's the Mantids in alliance with the Nordics and the Reptilians. Now, some people do believe that these four beings, that they're not organic beings in the sense of having evolved on their own planet over time or something like that. Some people believe that these have actually been genetically engineered on purpose to serve the roles that they're playing right now in abductions. So when a person is getting abducted, they're actually getting abducted by biological instruments of some other intelligence that we don't even know what it looks like. You know, like something unfathomable, maybe ultra terrestrial, hyperdimensional, something like that. It could even be extremely powerful demons for all we know, meaning that perhaps the entire alien hierarchy, it's possible that it's being headed up by an ultra intelligent, ultra powerful, chthonic kind of demon. So perhaps some people are correct in a way that aliens are demons, but it's not that they're one-to-one identically demons. It's perhaps they're really under the control of the demonic network, for all we know. So that's sort of how I view it, and it's based on 35 years of research and talking to thousands of people over the years who are also experiencers and kind of putting all that data together. These four types keep recurring, so I'm pretty confident that they exist and that they're the ones who have something in store for humanity in the future as far as disclosure and the whole disinformation agenda goes.
Why are they here? What do they get from exploiting us?
Well, so if you think about, let's say, just to go on a small side tangent, if you think about what is the motivation of demons, for example, and as I mentioned earlier, the whole point of demons is to try to destroy and corrupt the light within you. That's typically what they're for. Now, if you compare that to aliens and how they operate, aliens operate more like a scientific conglomerate of corporations and military all in one. That their sole purpose is to essentially take over and assimilate worlds and create biological products that they can use for their own expansion into the rest of the universe. So they act almost as an imperial conquering, subversive, biological, military scientific force. That's how I would put it. So you could view them essentially as an evil corporation because that's how they function. They're very cold. They're sociopathic. They view us as products to use or to design or to modify for their own purposes, right? So, I mean, some of them are into energy harvesting. So treating Earth as an energy farm. And Robert Monroe, one of the famous astral travel researchers, he had a few astral projection experiences where he was shown how Earth is an energy farm constructed by either aliens or hyperdimensional ultra-terrestrial beings that genetically engineered life, well, not all life on Earth, but a lot of life on Earth, to exist for the sole purpose of suffering, dying, and releasing the soul energy that they've accumulated through life. And then they harvest that soul energy, and then they use it for for something. Robert Monroe didn't. He wasn't given details on what this energy, which he called loosh, actually does. But however, if you look at the fields of occultism, especially the part of occultism called psychic vampirism, where you are taught to feed off the life force energy of others to make yourself feel better. See, that gives a clue as to what loosh is really used for. It's used for enhancing the life force, or the enhancing the mental clarity, the occult power, the feeling. It's almost like a drug. It's almost like a drug for aliens and for demons and other non-physical beings, because it makes them more alive. It makes them more powerful. It's like fuel for their technology, essentially. So, like, good metaphor for that would be Dune, the Dune books or the Dune movie. There's a substance called spice, which not only gives people psychic powers, but also is also used in their technology for interdimensional travel. And I think that's a metaphor for this loosh energy. And we, as humans, we are the sandworms of Dune, producing this thing. And in that book, the way you get this ultra powerful water of life is by taking one of these larval worms and drowning it in water, like putting it through suffering, and it releases this blue substance, which then when you imbibe it, it makes you very psychic and makes you able to see across time. Now, that substance is a metaphor for loosh energy, because if you absorb the life force energy of another person, you're going to feel just way better. You're going to have more energy, more clarity, more power. You're going to be on top of the world with the life force energy that you stole from them, because you're more alive, right? So that's essentially what this loosh energy is, and a certain aspect of the alien phenomenon seems to be geared towards this loosh farming operation. See, now that doesn't mean necessarily that Greys or Nordics eat our soul energy. The same way that someone who works on a dairy farm might not even be into milk. They might not even be lactose tolerant. They might not even be drinking the milk from the cows. However, they work on the farm to get paid, because that's part of their mission. It's part of what they do. So likewise, we have aliens who might not feed on our energy, but they're part of something that does. They're part of an industry that feeds on our soul energies, our life force energy. And if you just look at the world, if you just look at human history, how tragic it is with all the war and the suffering and famine, genocides, it's very easy to see that humanity has been finely tuned to be producers of loosh energy. Just because we are sentient enough to love and to care and to fight for something, right? We're sentient enough to be that, but we're not smart enough to see the entities that are extracting this energy from us and inducing fights, inducing wars, inducing suffering, and then reducing our lifespans and so on. So I do think that the human biological form has been finely tuned to, I hate to say it, but to be almost like cattle for these non-human forces that treat Earth as a farm. And that sounds very bad, but I must remind people, this is only half the picture. I mean, there's a whole other positive half as well. Like everything that I just talked about, that's like the dark side. That's like the dark rabbit hole that you can go down. But like, as I had said before on other shows, there's another rabbit hole that goes upwards. Okay, there's another rabbit hole that goes upwards into spirituality, metaphysics, angels, positive forces, the higher self, reincarnation, wisdom, lessons, the spirit, the God spark. See, all these positive things, those are things that are outside all of this dark stuff. It is beyond that. And it's where we truly come from. That's who we truly are at the core. We just happen to be here, embedded in darkness, being subjected to this energy farm because, well, that's an area of speculation. But personally, I believe that we made a gamble. We made a gamble that we come here into this darkness. We face these challenges. And as a result, we gain wisdom, we gain strength, we gain certain spiritual soul powers, so that when we leave, we are stronger and can do more things on the other side than we could otherwise, than just staying up there and not even coming here. But the downside is, by coming here, you lose a lot of your memories. I mean, you don't lose them permanently. They're just sequestered. So they're compartmentalized away. They're quarantined. So you don't have access to your past life memories necessarily. You go through life making mistakes. You suffer a lot for a lot of people. And so, the loosh farm operators, the ones who run this corporate farm, they get their energy from it. They get what they want. And then we get what we want, because we want the improvement of our souls. So it's almost like trial by fire, trial by water. We come here to face the ultimate darkness in order to learn discernment, knowledge, strength, glory, all these wonderful soul qualities, which you really can only get by coming here and not simply being there and learning it vicariously.
Mm.
See, because here's the thing. See, you could easily stay in the afterlife realm, in the higher spirit realms, and maybe watch people here and learn from their lessons. Okay, you can do that if you want. You can learn from other people's mistakes and the suffering that they're going through, and you can improve in your wisdom that way. But what you can't do is become stronger that way,
Mm.
because you're not going through it yourself. See, it's like a physical therapist or a sports medicine person who knows everything about the human body and how the muscles work, but they're not working out. They're not actually in the gym improving themselves physically.
Mm.
So if they want to improve themselves physically and put their knowledge into use, they got to come into the gym, start working out, make their muscles all sore. And at the end of that entire process, yeah, they're going to be fit and they're going to be living their knowledge. So I think that's one of the major attractions why higher souls come here, is to test themselves and actualize their wisdom and gain more wisdom. So we're kind of improving ourselves, but however, the cost, however, is that we pay an inordinate amount of life force and emotional and loose energy to the operators of this farm or this casino, right? So when people go to Las Vegas,
Mm.
they're going there to have a good time, maybe make some money, right? They're going there for the entertainment and to maybe make some money. But the casinos only exist to make money and to rip people off, right? But because they do that, that doesn't mean that there's no value to going to Las Vegas, because people do get something out of it. They get the fun, the experience, the flash, the food, whatever. They get that out of it, but it comes at a cost of potentially losing all your money. So I think Las Vegas is a pretty good metaphor for our reality and what's really going on here.
Okay. So since these aliens are technologically and spiritually more advanced than us, do we even have a chance? Like, how can we outmaneuver them and win?
So we would be totally screwed if one, there were no positive forces, like no positive aliens, no divine, no angels, no higher self, right? And if we lived in a part of the universe that is uh, the Wild West, where there is no police, there's no laws or anything, because then it's only a matter of strength. They want us, they want our planet, whatever. They come in by force and they take it, and there's nothing that they can do. However, if we live in a part of the universe that is actually quite populated and there's different civilizations around and they've been around for a very long time, then it stands to reason that they have certain laws worked out that are already in place. And one of the laws could be that we won't allow you to take over a planet that's still developing because it's not morally right, or whatever. Or the sector belongs to us, and the only way that you can get it is if the planet agrees to hand themselves over to you. See, so then it's no longer a matter of physical force. Then it becomes a matter of political, religious, social manipulation.
Mm.
Because then, if these forces can convince us to hand ourselves over to them, then they have full legal right to do whatever they want to this planet. And I think that explains a lot of what's going on, because so much of the alien agenda revolves around manipulating our beliefs, seeding disinformation, making themselves look good, making themselves look like the saviors that we need to rescue us from climate change, from World War III, from the corrupt politicians and our failed human leadership. These are all the ideas and points that you see over and over and over again being told to abductees, being told through channelers into the channeling community. Even certain abductees, it seems like they get groomed from a very young age to spout alien disinformation into the rest of the world. So they grow up and they start writing books on how awesome the Greys are and 10 steps to inviting Greys into your life and so on. They put out this disinformation in order to convince humans that aliens are good, that we need them as our saviors, that they can help us, that they're more advanced, that they're like our older advanced brothers, and there are space brothers. Even the Vatican said that ET is our brother, So this disinformation line gets repeated, and that is happening simultaneously with all the problems in the world getting worse and worse and worse, right? What are we told through media? That we need measures to counteract climate change, for example, that we're on the brink of World War III, that our leaders are corrupt. See, these things are being told on one hand, and the solution is being shined up and polished on the other hand. And so for me, I predict that within our lifetime, we're going to see those two come together, where aliens will show up and they'll be hailed as heroes or saviors to help us through the crisis that was artificially manipulated in the first place. It's like they create the disease and then offer themselves as a cure. Problem, reaction, solution. So
Okay.
that's where I think the alien agenda is ultimately going. And if you ask, like, what can we do about it? Well, it helps to spread information and knowledge so that we as a planet don't hand ourselves over. Why? Because we see through the deception. If you don't have that knowledge, then you're going to fall for it. But as soon as you realize, well, that's what they're doing, then the gig is up, because now you know how they work and you know that they're not good guys and so on. So that's sort of the best thing that we can do. As far as like physical fighting, it's going to be very hard to do that, because, as you said, they're very advanced. They're advanced telepathically. So they've got psychic powers. They got invisibility. They got weapons that we can't even conceive of. They can dematerialize an entire army if they wanted to with their technology. So the only thing that we can really do is spread knowledge and ally ourselves with higher positive powers, whether it's divine forces or whether it is actual, genuinely benevolent aliens that are opposed to those other alien types, the Greys, the reptilians and mantids and so on. The only problem with allying with positive aliens is that the negative ones pretend to be positive,
Mm.
you see. And so that's why in the New Age community, you have channeling from, let's say, the Galactic Federation of Light or the Ashtar Command or the Taigetan stuff. All that stuff, in my personal opinion, okay, I think it's just disinformation. I think it's negative forces that are pretending to be good guys in order to lead humanity astray. And the way that could easily work is, one day, let's say aliens show up, but they look like what? They look like supermodels. They look like humans. Whatever. They look, just these beautiful human-looking aliens, and they say that we're here to solve your problems and give you technology. All you have to do is do what we say. We'll make a treaty, and we'll take the lead. We'll become your new leaders, and you do what we say. And all that stuff would be prefaced by the earlier channeling and disinformation stuff saying that aliens are good. And so if that were to happen and we fall for it, then we would be screwed, because then we are forfeiting all the protection that we currently have from not having made that choice yet, you see. So we have to be careful. So we have to be careful that the aliens that show up one day, if they do, most likely they will be the deceivers. They will pretend to be the good guys. They'll pretend to be positive. And you have to look at actions. You have to look at intentions. And you really have to be very critically minded and discerning to be able to see through that sort of thing. Now, in addition to those imposters, I do believe that there are actual, genuine, positive aliens, and they do also look human.
Mm.
So you've got these beings that look human who are the bad guys. You've got other beings that are human who could potentially be the good guys, and you can't rely on visuals to distinguish one from the other. You can only rely on the content of their message and the actions that they take and the impact that those messages and actions have on humanity and on the future. So that's sort of what we have to look forward to in the future. If the aliens ever want to come out, I think we're going to have a lot of confusion between who's a good guy, who's a bad guy. And then, as I said, the only way to really see through it is to have extremely good intuition and also to have done a lot of research, so already going into it what the deal is.
Okay. So, a while back, you said, and I read this even on your website, that the aliens are trying to use us as food, as etheric food.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to feed on our energy to kind of delay paying their spiritual debt for all the bad things that they've done. And above these five-dimensional aliens, what really remains over there is the logos or the thought center. uh, so will like what is that, what is the thought center, or what is the black sun?
Personally, I think the Black Sun is the Demiurge, specifically the part of the Demiurge that has been corrupted by beings here in the Matrix, you could say, who use the power of manifesting and demiurgic technology for evil. So they corrupted a part of the operating system in order to serve their own ends. It's just like malware or Trojans on your computer. If you got this malware on your computer, it's a part of your operating system that serves the purpose of the hacker. Whether it's to steal your data or drain your bank account of money or something. Well, there's a part of creation that has been corrupted and serves the benefit of the dark beings that are here, that are using its power to manipulate our reality, to make our reality worse for us than it should be. Yeah, that's essentially it.
Okay. So, isn't it inevitable in a way that these five-dimensional aliens will have to pay their debt for all the evil that they've done?
Yeah, right. And so if you're a negative being, okay, if you're a negative being, you are on a path of evolution, you could say. Although I would think of it more as a path of spiritual de-evolution. So they're actually de-evolving spiritually, but they are evolving in terms of intelligence and technology and power. Okay, so they're evolving along those lines. But that path cannot go on for forever, because let's say you become a super powerful demon in the astral realm, and you've got your whole bag of magical tricks and all these other minion demons working for you. Well, where can you go beyond that? See, beyond that, to go even higher, that's where you have to enter into the upper astral planes, the higher spirit realms where the angels are, where divine forces exist. See, there's only so far you can go in darkness before your path reaches a dead end. And if you keep trying to push the darkness and the manipulation and keep ignoring your true God spark within you and keep like feeding your ego and your shadow, what eventually happens is you suffer a kind of spiritual gravitational collapse. It's like the ultimate entropy that happens. So it's like, when a star gets too big and it burns itself out and starts collapsing, it collapses into a black hole, and it loses what it was. It's no longer a shining star. Now it's just like an inert black hole that really can't do anything. So I think that happens too on a spiritual level. And actually, other sources like the Law of One Material, it kind of proposes that similar idea, but I've heard it in different sources. Just the idea that the dark path, you can't go beyond a certain point to continue evolving. And if you try to, while maintaining darkness, you just implode, because you've been accumulating mass, spiritual mass, by taking life force energy from others. You've been accumulating this gravity, and eventually it becomes so strong that you just collapse. So I think there's no path forward for the dark forces at that point. And if they do want to keep evolving, they're going to have to flip over to the light. They're going to have to flip over to the light, and then they can keep going like way, way, way higher. And I think that path is so attractive to some of them that they do make the flip. So I do think that some entities, they do the dark path and then they flip over to the light to continue their evolution. And then other ones that are too stubborn, they eventually just collapse, and then that's the end of their consciousness. That's my personal view on what happens to them.
Okay, okay. So we are already 1 month into this year. Do you have any predictions for 2024? What do you think is in store for humanity this year?
2024, what's that one saying? There are years where months happen and months where years happen, or something like that.
Yeah.
Basically, we are in a time period now where things are moving so rapidly. It's like going down a river and approaching the rapids in the river, and someone asks you, what path do you think our boat will take after this rapids is over? And the person will say, well, there's really no way to know, because it's chaos. It's literal chaos. Now you can make extrapolations based on current trends, but unless you're given the precognition of a prophet, I think it's hard to say exactly what will happen. But I think just on the most ordinary 3D boring level, I do think that certain things will happen. One, I do believe that either US or Russia will start to resume nuclear testing in a big way. To start, okay. And when they do nuclear testing, it sends a message. It sends a message that we are rebuilding our nuclear arsenal. We're preparing for nuclear war. So I think that's going to happen. I think we're going to see a dramatic increase in proxy wars. So, some people have been predicting war between US and Russia and China, but that's like the big stuff. I don't see that happening until 2027, 2020, or 2030s. Like, so 2027 to 2030, that's when I see that happening. But for now, I think we'll see proxy wars where those countries are using other countries to fight against each other. So, for example, we've got Lebanon, Yemen is already happening, Ukraine has happened, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania are probably next. Russia is probably going to go into those countries. And so you're going to see a lot more proxy wars that are going to hit those areas pretty hard, like especially Lebanon. I think Lebanon is going to be the next area in terms of being bombed pretty heavily. So that's going to happen. I see cyber attacks happening in the US and Europe. So not by Russia and China necessarily, but by proxy countries or hacker groups that are actually truly working for Russia and China. Because the thing is, if Russia and China directly attacked America with a cyber attack, then that would give a reason for America to respond in other ways, and it would totally escalate. But if it's done through an anonymous hacker group, then there is no country that can be blamed for it. You see, so you can take down, you can disrupt an enemy without catching the blame for it. So I think that's what they're probably going to do. So we're going to see an increase in cyber attacks in America that will disrupt, online banking and being able to use your debit card. I don't know how bad it will get. I think the bad stuff will be after 2024. And I think for this year, we're just going to see a ratcheting up in the intensity of a lot of things. We do have some good news. We got a lot of like populist movements that are taken off. Populism in India is taken off against Modi, for example. The populism in Europe against Macron and Schultz of Germany and the UK leadership. So the people are rising up and they're organizing, or like currently all the farmers in the Netherlands, for example, fighting that whole Great Reset agenda. So we're going to see way more of that. In America, in America, I think there's going to be a lot more corruption being revealed about the Biden administration and the whole deep state. Because that's been a trend for even since 2016. Ever since Trump got in, it's been a very steady drip of exposing the hypocrisy, the evil, the corruption of the deep state. And I think that's just going to accelerate more and more leading up to the 2024 elections. Now, if things keep going at the current rate, then of course, Trump is going to return to power. That's just the way things are pointing right now. It's obvious. But what we cannot predict is whether the other side wishes to suspend the elections in some way or take him out or something, one of these wild black swan events. That's also very possible. And there are people with precognitive abilities or remote viewers who claim that the elections in 2024 will not happen in America. And how can that be? Well, it could be a cyber attack. It could be even a natural disaster that's actually probably artificially caused. It could be the brewing civil war issue right now, because there's people in Texas who are mobilizing to defend the border, and Biden says no, you cannot put up these barriers on the border, and so these states are getting invaded from Mexico, and Biden says you can't do anything about it, right? So that's like a rip in the fabric of society in America, and that rip could just get wider and wider and wider until you do have enough of a like a minor civil war situation that they suspend the elections because it's martial law, and they're going to try to lump Trump in with these so-called seditious conspirators and insurgents, right? So they say that he's no longer eligible for presidency because he's the one that's responsible for ripping America apart. So they have all kinds of tricks that they could play to prevent the election. But if Trump does get back in, I think that we will have probably 2, maybe 3 years of a return to normalcy, peace, prosperity, new technologies coming out. However, because a big part of his agenda, or the agenda of people that control him, because a big part of that is taking down the deep state, and because the deep state is heavily tied into China, the CCP, at some point China is going to be tried to be held accountable for COVID and for election funny business in America, like printing ballots and so on. They're going to be held responsible for that, and that could lead to retaliation against China that could escalate into war. So I think 2027 through 2030, that's when we could see a war between US and China. That's where I'm thinking it might probably be. But this year, no, Ukraine's going to get worse. Poland's going to get dragged into it. Germany's going to start sending soldiers over more and more. And it's just going to get pretty ugly. I don't see any resolution necessarily happening this year with that. So that's just on a 3D level. That's sort of what I see happening this year. More of the same, just more intense.
Okay, what do you think about these other presidential candidates like Vivek Ramaswamy or Robert F. Kennedy or Nikki Haley, who's seen as this corrupt puppet politician?
Yeah, well, Nikki Haley is a classic politician in that if someone pays her to have a certain point of view, she'll have that point of view, right? Yeah. So the way it works in politics is the whole, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back. And so all these money interests, drug cartels, the criminal aspects of government, they prefer certain candidates over others because those candidates will scratch their backs. So they kind of look out for each other. And Nikki Haley is one of those that scratches people's backs. That's all there's to it. So that's why so many Democrats are for her. That's why so many rhinos, Republicans and names only, are for her, because they're part of that swamp. They're part of that deep state, and she's their candidate. That's who they want. Now, Vivek, for a while, I thought perhaps he was like a Trojan horse, mimicking all the Trump points in order to take votes away from Trump in the primaries. But as we've seen, that's not what happened. And as soon as he dropped out, he endorsed Trump that same night. So that fits the other hypothesis, which is that he was, in a way, a proxy for Trump the entire time. Because and that's why Trump stayed out of the debates. He said that there's no reason for me to debate because the entire country knows what I'm about, so I don't need to do the debates. But he still had someone there saying all the same points that he would say, and that was Vivek. I mean, Vivek, he is he's the embodiment of being based. Okay, he's the embodiment of just saying truth in a very blunt way, and he's the kind of guy that Trump would want to have out there, right? And both of them are successful businessmen. I'm sure they've got mutual respect for each other in that sense. So, I think he was sort of a stand-in running interference for Trump. And I have a suspicion, I can't confirm it, but I wonder if RFK Jr. as well is serving a similar role for a different audience. See, because Vivek was there for the independents and for the mainstream Republican audience. That's what he was speaking his voice towards, because those were the debates. The people who wanted to see DeSantis debate and Nikki Haley debate, well, they got an earful of Vivek saying America First policies, right? So they got it through him. And then RFK Jr., he seems to be appealing to independents, but also the more moderate part of the Democratic Party, the ones who look at Biden and look at the far leftists and the Marxists and wonder, like, what the hell's wrong with those guys, right? Because there's a part of the Democratic Party that is still rational, that is still sane, that didn't go along with a hard left turn that the Democrats took during the Obama years. So those are the ones that RFK Jr. is appealing to, and if he runs independent, then he's going to take all those votes with him, which is going to take votes away from Biden, which is going to give Trump the boost. So that's another way that I can see RFK Jr., whether he intends it or not, benefiting Trump. So that's my opinion of him. Now, opinion of his policies personally, I think he's a little too non-committal or iffy on the Second Amendment, because he says, "I will defend your Second Amendment unless Congress, the majority says we should ban assault rifles. Then I'll totally sign it." That's what he says. So he doesn't stand on principle there. He's just going to go with whatever the majority opinion is, and that to me signifies that he doesn't have any core belief in the ideals of the Second Amendment. He just says that, as a politician. So you get that. He also said that he would try very hard to dig into the truth behind UFOs, like what the government knows about UFOs, and to release that truth, right? But then in that same tweet, he says, "I will do this if there is no good reason to keep it secret." So he always puts conditionals. He always puts conditionals on these claims that he's making, and to me, that's kind of a red flag. So I don't know what his deal is there, but I think functionally, in the end, he's going to help Trump out by taking votes away from Biden. So that's my opinion of RFK Jr. So we got that. DeSantis is out, and I already mentioned Nikki Haley, and Biden. We all know about Biden. We know that he's cognitively gone, and that he's just a puppet being puppeted by very radical, almost communist forces, that are surrounding him. So we know what the deal is there. I think that he's going to be sacrificed, politically sacrificed by the left, and probably someone else is going to put in his place to run in 2024. Who that could be, we'll have to see. It could be Hillary, it could be Michelle Obama. I mean, hell, if they get desperate enough, they could trot Taylor Swift out just to get the youth vote or something. Who knows? Okay. Who knows how desperate they will get?
To really get into the whole conspiracy thing, is Michelle Obama a guy?
Well, all I can say is that if she gets in and she wins, it would be Obama's fourth term, because Biden is Obama's third term. And actually, I mean, there's a lot of good reason. There's Obama himself said that one of his greatest wishes was to have a third presidency, where he could just sit in a room somewhere, speaking to a microphone into the earpiece of whoever's the actual president, and still be able to make decisions. Well, he lives in DC, and his house was wired with all these electronics and network cables and so on. Like, what the hell is he doing there? What if he is still directing a lot of what Biden is doing? I mean, that's theoretical, but it's possible, right? So, and then if Michelle gets in, that'd be the fourth term of Obama, and some people who are fans of Obama would greatly love that, but it would be very bad for our country, because the U.S. has been in a downhill slide ever since Obama got in back in 2008. I mean, that's when a lot of the racial divisions heightened to a great degree. A lot of the and eventually that led to the Black Lives Matter movement. But back then, with the Trayvon Martin case and a lot of the race baiting that the Obamas did, a lot of the radicalization of the black community, it's done a disservice to civil rights and to racial harmony and cooperation in America, because they're acting now as if everything from the 60s onwards, civil rights and everything that happened in the 80s and the 90s, that never happened. And it's actually still 1950. There's still massive racism.
Yes.
It's systemic and so on, right? They're inventing this in order to justify even further racism on their part. So it's sociopathic, it's psychopathic, it's not warranted, and as bad as Trump may be in a personal way, some people really hate him for this or that, mean tweets or whatever, being a womanizer, whatever. It still pales in comparison to the crimes that have been committed on the Democrat side and also on the Rhino deep state side. So if you compare those two, it's not even comparison. I mean, the other side, we're talking about human trafficking. We're talking about children being abused in very, very bad ways, going missing. That's why they want to keep the border open, because they're smuggling drugs and human traffickers and probably agent saboteurs for whatever they want in the future, if they want to take down society for false flag reasons or something like that. So we're dealing with one party that still has principles and another party that never had principles to begin with, but now they're just revealing their true colors more and more because they think that they have the upper hand, right? So they're getting very brazen with it. They're getting very brazen and also very desperate. And that's revealing their true colors. And that's why there have been so many Democrats who've crossed over, who stop being Democrats because they don't agree with what their party is doing, because they still have common sense. They still have rationality. They've never been one of these naive children on the left or one of these psychopathic controllers on the left, because that's sort of what the left consists of. It consists of a group of well-meaning but naive people being manipulated by a class of sociopaths and psychopath politicians. That's like the synergy that's going on over there. And so now in America, there's an opportunity for people to really support a movement. I'm not saying support Trump. I'm saying supporting a movement, because it's bigger than Trump. We're talking about a revival of constitutional principles, free speech, right? Private property, individualism, Second Amendment, all the good stuff that supposedly is what made America what it was. It's about to go extinct, but there's a chance to flip it all around and take it in a positive new direction. And so I think that's how the American population perceives it right now. I'm kind of summarizing what their views are. And that's why they believe that it's an existential crisis that we're going through, that 2024 could be the last election if it happens at all, right? So this is like where all the chips are on the table. This is it. This is it. And that's why things are just heating up so much here in America. And if chaos happens here, it's going to spread to other parts of the world too. So that's why I think. So I'm not saying this just because I live in America and therefore I only think about America. I think about the effects of America, what happens here, on the rest of the world. So no matter where you are in the world, it'll affect you if America goes down the tubes. So I think 2024 election matters for everyone on planet Earth.
Yeah, I think US elections impact not just the US but the entire world. That's why the whole world is tuned in.
Yeah.
Not that many people care about elections in Latvia or Ecuador. Like, they don't affect us that much.
Mhm.
Not to say that
Right.
these countries don't matter, but the geopolitical effects of US election is overreaching. Uh, is talking about child trafficking. You brought up the fact about child trafficking. Who was Jeffrey Epstein really? What was his role?
Well, the only thing we truly know is that he was an agent for the Israeli intelligence service. So he was working for Israel, and he was blackmailing politicians from around the world, but especially in America, blackmailing them by not only on the island, but also on his property in the Southwest somewhere. Was it Arizona or Nevada somewhere? Where his property, every room had cameras in it. So he would invite these politicians over. He'd have underage people there, film them, and then blackmail the politicians to do the bidding of Epstein and whoever controls him, which is, guess what, that other country. So that's sort of what he was doing. He was just in it for his personal egomaniacal gratification, but also to serve his controllers and their ultimate agenda. So that's pretty much all it is, in my opinion.
Okay. All right. So, you also talk a lot about scalar physics and how it can
Mm-hmm.
give human beings a fighting chance. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
like, briefly, could you tell us what is scalar physics?
So all the physics that we know right now, like all the technology that we use, for example, when you get on a cell phone and you talk to your friend on a cell phone, it's using radio waves communicating with a cell phone tower. Well, those radio waves, they're made of electric and magnetic fields. That's why they call it electromagnetism. However, there are fields that are not electric and they're not magnetic, but they are the things that give rise to electric and magnetic fields. They're like more like simpler, more fundamental fields. And those fundamental fields can be used in other ways besides electromagnetism. And you can use those other things for communication, for altering gravity, for scanning the aura of a person. I mean, this is like black ops technology that I'm talking about. This is alien technology. So there's a whole aspect of science or of the physics of reality that science doesn't know about, mainstream science doesn't know about. And so scalar physics has to do with all these other fields these fields of energy, these other force fields that are not used for conventional technology. That's pretty much all it is.
Okay. And finally, to conclude the podcast, I want to ask a very vague kind of a question. Like, does God exist? And if he exists, if he or she exists, like, what is God?
That's the ultimate question. That is the ultimate question. And ultimately, no one knows, right? Because if God exists, then God is infinite and timeless and eternal. And philosophically, no finite being can comprehend infinity to its full extent. But what we can do, however, is grasp metaphors or grasp a reflection of it. It's like when you take a cube and you project it down on a piece of paper, it creates like a square or it creates like an octagon or a hexagon, right? And that's what a flatlander can understand. They can understand a square, they can understand, but they can't really understand the cube. But you can still understand the projection of it. So I think God ultimately is nothing but pure consciousness. It is the source of all life, all consciousness, and therefore even the source of the Demiurge and everything that's in it. Right? So all of existence is contained within the mind of the infinite consciousness that is God. Now, a being that is that extensive, I'm not sure that being has enough individual personality to intervene in our lives personally on its behalf. I think that it would either create or emanate or allow higher positive beings to play that role in its place. So, for example, if you were to pray to God for help with a particular situation and you do get that help, I think it's more likely that you're helped by an angel or some sort of higher divine being or a positive being, but not necessarily the one true infinite creator. But they were doing it on the infinite creator's behalf. Because as a positive being, the more you evolve, the more your God spark within you grows in size and power, right? So you become more godlike in your will and your intelligence. And so whatever the divine will is, it expresses itself through these higher beings. And those higher beings then are the ones that end up helping you out. So I believe in God, but I don't believe in an anthropomorphic man in heaven who decides you get punishment, you get reward, and so on. I don't believe in that. I think that's kind of primitive, just personally thinking. But I do think that there are higher beings that are like a man in heaven that do decide that, but they're not necessarily God. I think they're just servants of the divine that follow divine rules and that love us very dearly, just as the infinite creator loves all life. And if we connect with the part within us that is from that realm, the divinity within us, if we connect with that, then that's almost like our personal phone number to divinity. The more we express it, the more we are helped by these divine powers, because they feel very encouraged that a fragment of infinity that is here as a human being is rediscovering its light and is working its way back up. And that's what they ultimately want to help. So these angels, these beings, unlike aliens, these beings, they care very much for our soul, for our spirit, for the growth of our spiritual evolution. That's the one thing that they truly care about. Whereas positive aliens, they might care more about, that humanity is free in the future of genetic manipulation, that we get to decide our own fate as a planet. I mean, that's good, but it's not as high level as what the angels and the divine cares about, which is the nurturing that divine God spark within you, so that you can surpass the limitations that you've put upon yourself by coming here into this matrix. And so that you kind of grow, that you bring heaven down to earth and express it through you, and that you rise above the conditions of the earth. That's sort of what they care about. And I think I think that's an important philosophy to keep in mind. That despite all the dark stuff, despite the human child trafficking and the negative aliens and the demons and so on, it's very important to remember there is good. We have it within us. There are higher beings that want us to express it, and that if we just align with that within us, then we will be on the winning side no matter what.
All right. This was a very insightful conversation, Tom. I think we will. I think I've learned a lot in the past 2 hours. Thank you so much, Tom, for coming on the Labyrinth.
Yeah, thank you so much. Had a great time too.